If you think your family is bad, buckle up. What I went through will make you appreciate even the most annoying relatives in your life. By the time you finish this story, you'll either be grateful for what you have or terrified that you might end up like me. Growing up, I always knew something was off about my family. It wasn't just the occasional weird behavior or the odd rules that didn't make sense. No, my family operated on a completely different wavelength, as if they were living in some twisted parallel universe where normal logic didn't apply. I remember being a kid and thinking that everyone's parents acted like mine. I thought it was normal for your mother to stage dramatic breakdowns over the smallest inconveniences, for your father to treat you like a personal servant, and for every family gathering to feel like a battlefield. I thought all siblings were supposed to be competitors, not companions. That's just how life was in my house. But the older I got, the more I realized that my childhood had been a slow-motion car crash, one that I was trapped inside with no way out. My mother was the kind of person who could turn a peaceful morning into a nuclear disaster within minutes. If the coffee wasn't made the way she liked it, if a chair was slightly out of place, or if she imagined some slight offense that never actually happened, she would explode. There was no reasoning with her. She would scream, cry, throw things, anything to make sure that everyone around her suffered for whatever minor inconvenience had ruined her day. My father, on the other hand, was the opposite. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. Instead, he would go completely silent, ignoring everyone like they didn't exist, sometimes for days. If he was mad at me, I could beg, apologize, even cry in front of him, and he would just walk past me like I was a ghost. I never knew which was worse, my mother's explosive rage or my father's cold indifference. Then there was my brother. If there was one person in the world who could make my life even more miserable, it was him. He wasn't just a bully, he was the kind of person who enjoyed making other people suffer. If I was in pain, if I was struggling, if I was upset, that was entertainment for him. I can't count how many times he sabotaged me just for the fun of it, hiding my schoolwork, blaming me for things he did, even taking my things and destroying them just to watch my reaction. The worst part? My parents never stopped him. In fact, they encouraged it. They thought it was funny, that he was just being a boy, that I was too sensitive. They never cared that I was miserable. They just wanted peace and quiet, and if that meant letting my brother torment me so that I was too scared to make a fuss, then so be it. I spent most of my childhood trying to be invisible. I learned early on that the less attention I drew to myself, the safer I was. If I did everything perfectly, if I stayed quiet, if I never argued, if I never showed emotions, then maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't be a target that day. It never worked. No matter what I did, I was always in the wrong. If I got good grades, my parents would complain that I wasn't helping enough around the house. If I did chores, they'd say I was lazy for not doing more. If I stood up for myself against my brother, I was told to stop being dramatic. If I let him torment me, I was weak for not fighting back. There was no winning. I thought that once I turned 18, things would get better. I thought that once I was an adult, I could escape and finally live a normal life. I had no idea that the worst was still yet to come. Turning 18 was supposed to be my golden ticket out of this nightmare. For years, I fantasized about the day I could finally pack my things, walk out the door, and never look back. I imagined a life where I didn't have to tiptoe around my mother's meltdowns, where I wasn't treated like a servant by my father, and where my brother wasn't constantly scheming to make my life miserable. But reality had other plans. I had no savings. No car. No support system. Every dollar I ever earned mysteriously disappeared under my parents' control. They convinced me to hand over my paychecks, saying they were saving the money for my future. I was naive enough to believe them until the day I asked for it back. That was the moment the illusion shattered. My mother acted as if I had insulted her entire existence, screaming that I was ungrateful, selfish, and that after everything she did for me, I had the audacity to demand money. My father simply shrugged and told me I should be happy they let me live under their roof for free. The money was gone. I had nothing. I tried to fight back. I told them I was leaving anyway, that I would figure things out on my own. That's when they played their trump card. The car I had been driving, my car, the one I had worked for, the one I had taken care of for years, wasn't actually mine. It was in my father's name. The insurance? Also under him. If I left, I was leaving with nothing but the clothes on my back. I had nowhere to go. No way to get there. No way to support myself. So I stayed. Not by choice, but because my parents had made sure I had no other option. That's when the real nightmare began. Now that I was an adult, my family's treatment of me escalated. My mother demanded I take on more responsibilities around the house, as if I were her personal assistant. My father expected me to contribute financially, even though they had stolen every cent I ever earned. My brother? He was worse than ever. He saw me as a punching bag, someone he could vent his frustrations on, because he knew I couldn't leave. I was stuck. I spent my days working a dead-end job, only to come home and be treated like a second-class citizen in my own house. I wasn't allowed to make my own decisions. If I tried to set boundaries, my mother would explode, my father would go silent, and my brother would find new ways to make my life hell. I wasn't living. I was surviving. And then, just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, my mother made an announcement that sent me into a new level of despair. She had decided that I wasn't moving out. Not ever. According to her, I was meant to stay home, take care of the family, and support them financially. I didn't need independence. I didn't need my own life. I had a duty to them. That was the moment I knew I had to get out. No matter what it took, I knew I couldn't stay any longer. My mother had made it clear she didn't see me as an independent person with my own life and dreams. To her, I was an extension of herself, a tool to be used, a servant to be ordered around. My father had no interest in anything other than keeping the house quiet, and my brother? He thrived on my suffering. If I didn't escape soon, I never would. But I had no resources, no money, no safety net. My parents had made sure of that. Every avenue of escape had been blocked. I couldn't just pack a bag and leave, I had nowhere to go. I was trapped in a house where my every move was controlled, my every decision ridiculed, my every attempt at freedom shut down before it could begin. So I started planning in secret. I knew I had to be careful. If my parents even suspected that I was trying to leave, they would do everything in their power to stop me. My mother would throw one of her hysterical breakdowns, my father would suddenly start paying attention, just long enough to make sure I failed, and my brother would sabotage me just for fun. The first thing I needed was money. But that was easier said than done. My job barely paid enough to keep me afloat, and whatever I earned was expected to go to the household. My mother had a habit of snooping through my things, so stashing cash in my room wasn't an option. I got creative. I started withdrawing tiny amounts at a time, just enough that it wouldn't be noticeable. I would buy cheap items, return them for cash, and stash the money in places my mother would never check: inside old books, inside the lining of my worn-out jacket, even in a hollowed-out section of my mattress. It wasn't much, but it was something. Next, I needed a way out. The car was out of the question. My father owned it, and I knew he'd never let me take it. Public transportation was unreliable, and I had no friends who could help. My parents had made sure I was isolated. That left one option: I had to leave on foot and figure things out from there. I spent weeks planning, memorizing routes, figuring out where I could go that my family wouldn't immediately find me. I researched shelters, cheap motels, and even random places where I could hide if I had to. The day I finally made my move, I felt like I was walking on a tightrope over a pit of fire. One wrong step and everything would come crashing down. I waited until late at night, when everyone was asleep. I had packed a small bag with only the essentials: clothes, a few hidden bills, a water bottle. Anything bigger would raise suspicion. My heart pounded as I crept through the house, terrified that at any moment my mother would wake up and catch me. I made it to the door. I turned the knob, stepped outside, and felt the night air on my face. For the first time in my life, I was free. Or so I thought. Because just as I reached the sidewalk, I heard a voice behind me. It was my brother. I didn't know how long he had been watching me, but the look on his face told me everything. I wasn't getting away that easily. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs as I turned to face my brother. He stood there in the dim light, arms crossed, a smug grin stretching across his face. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't confused. He had been expecting this. I don't know how long he had been watching me, but he had that look, the one he always got when he was about to ruin my life just for fun. "You're not going anywhere," he said. Panic shot through me. If he woke my parents, it was over. My mother would scream, cry, and throw herself into hysterics. My father would sit me down and lecture me about family duty. My escape plan would be dead before it even began. I tried to keep my face neutral, to pretend like I wasn't about to run for my life. "Just taking a walk," I muttered. He laughed. He didn't believe me for a second. I could see it in his eyes, he was savoring this moment. He held all the power. He knew that if he yelled, if he so much as whispered my name too loudly, my parents would be at the door in seconds. I had two choices: beg him to stay quiet or find a way to get past him. Begging wasn't an option. I had spent my whole life being the weak one, the one who stayed quiet, who took the abuse, who let him win every single time. But not this time. Not tonight. I bolted. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I just turned and ran. I heard him curse behind me, heard his footsteps pounding against the pavement as he chased me. I ran faster than I ever had in my life. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I didn't know where I was going. I had no destination, no plan beyond getting as far away from that house as possible. I heard my brother's footsteps fade behind me. He wasn't fast enough. He had always been stronger than me, but he had never been faster. I ran until my legs gave out. Until my chest heaved and my vision blurred. I collapsed in the shadow of an old gas station, my mind racing with what to do next. I had made it out. But now what? I had no car. No home. No job that paid me enough to survive on my own. I pulled out the small stash of money I had saved. It wasn't much, but it was enough to last a few days. I spent that first night sleeping in an alley behind a convenience store, terrified that my family would track me down. Every car that passed sent a jolt of fear through me. The next few weeks were a blur. I bounced between cheap motels and shelters, doing everything I could to survive. I took whatever work I could find at cleaning, stocking shelves, anything that paid in cash. It wasn't easy, but it was better than being trapped in that house. Then, one day, I got a message. It was from my mother. She begged me to come home, swore that things would be different, that she missed me. That my father forgave me. That my brother wanted to talk. I deleted the message. I knew better. They didn't miss me. They missed having control over me. They missed having someone to blame, someone to manipulate, someone to use. I had fought too hard to escape. There was no way I was going back. It took years to rebuild my life. Years of struggle, of scraping by, of working myself to the bone just to survive. But I did it. I got a better job. I found a place of my own. I started over. And now, when I look back at the life I left behind, I don't feel guilt. I don't feel regret. I feel relief. Because I know, without a doubt, that if I had stayed, I never would have survived. I escaped. And I never looked back.